Kia
All
ora.
right. Hello.
Kia ora.
So we're on the first ever Fits Don't Quit podcast. Out here with I've Got the Goods.
Yeah.
What are you
Yeah.
wearing today? Let's start with that.
All right. Today I'm wearing primarily thrifted, vintage, or small business, small owned. So I've got 1940s wool coat on. I have. I'm layered. Like we're really. It's very cold in Aotearoa at the moment. So I've got a 1940s coat on. I've got vintage Zambezi kind of black chore coat, which I bought secondhand. Um,
Nice.
I've got, this is Koto, a small New Zealand brand that make like all their products out of organic cotton. Um, ribbed like turtleneck, beautiful color. I've got a waistcoat on, as I seem to always have on. Um, Thermal, singlet, and I've gone for, oh, are we gonna like take a photo of this later maybe?
Yeah.
Um, I've got I think it's a 1940s wool skirt, but it potentially is like a 1980s or 1990s reproduction. And it's got some pleats in it, beautiful khaki color. And I also have some long pants on, 1980s. Did the skirt over pants situation primarily out of function versus style because it's cold. And I also have my thrifted Puma suedes in black. So we got heaps of layers on. But yeah, it's uh, I like it.
Yeah. I mean you got killer style, dude. Like the when I was creeping the feed,
Yeah.
it just feels like you're drawing on a lot of like classic workwear, almost like a little bit of Americana, but then you're doing your own thing and then making it very like your own silhouette and just you're adapting like true vintage and making your own. What's the inspiration behind it and how do you describe your style?
Describing one's style, I think, is such an interesting thing because personally, like my style's changing and evolving as I change and evolve as a person. So to like place a label on it, it probably most accurately would be that it is a reflection of where I'm at within myself.
Hmm.
Um, as a stylistic point, currently I feel like, as you kind of mentioned, I'm drawn to like vintage workwear, and I'm also drawn to like quite classic tailored silhouettes that you might have seen in the 40s or older. But I also like to draw on like modern day streetwear references, wearing the sneakers or a cap or something that kind of brings it back to today. Um, and yeah, I'm also really inspired by like Japanese workwear. Like it's just, and their tailoring as well. I've always been in such awe of um, the old and the new stuff that comes out of there. So that definitely inspires me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I've been trying to answer that question for myself for what that is, but
Mm.
like out of Japan, Korea, you have these Asian dudes that are doing like kind of like they call it a city boy style. So it's kind of
Yeah.
all the classic Americana, but just a little bit different, almost like ALD styling of like here with the dad cap. So all of a sudden it's contemporary. It's not just like stuffy like classic clothing.
That's actually definitely what I do. Is like I go fully like classic, and then I pop the cap on, and it kind of just it adds something for me that feels more true to me and to the current day, I suppose. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So kind of that deeper level there, right? Like how does your current style reflect I've got the goods as it is in 2024 spring?
Yeah, interesting. I think my style, what it says about I've got goods or myself, Rhiannon, as I am today, is that I'm someone that is a lot more centered and sure of herself and sure of who I am in the world. So I'm happy to take up space. And that means that I'm happy to do something that's a bit different than what I'm necessarily seeing in my day to day. I'm happy to do something that feels like an accurate representation of how I'm feeling in this day and what's comfortable, but what also is maybe pushing the average day to day looks, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
love that for you. how did we end up with the current style? Was there like an exploratory style phase where you look back and you're like, oh, what the heck was I wearing?
Yeah, I've been on this exploratory experience for quite a long time, like ever since I was quite young. Even like even when we were like four, my mum gave us, my twin and I, license to dress ourselves. We were wearing as many clothes as we could. We had like two skirts, two pairs of pants, as many tops as we could. We were layering until we couldn't layer anymore, and we were waddling around. So I feel like it's been like a day dot kind of experimentation. But especially as a teenager, and when I started going to a college where we could wear our own clothes, because I moved high schools a few times, and a few of them had uniforms. So my last high school, you could wear what you wanted to, and that really gave a lot of opportunity to explore. Um, Also being young, and I guess just like the echo chamber of like the age I was and what was relevant to our like the pop culture of my age is that we were shopping thrifted and secondhand when I was like 13 and 14. And I think just like when you're shopping secondhand, that shapes the way that you dress quite a lot because it's subject to what you can get. Um, but it also means that it's so subject to like individual interpretation of what looks good to you versus it being so influenced by what's happening around us. Um, or just like it's an interpretation of the trends that you're seeing around you. I feel like when I was younger, I really just liked the idea of following trends. I was really fixated on being unique and different. And that almost was so strongly reflected in the way I dress. But these days, I don't feel that way about it anymore. I kind of see it as an opportunity to celebrate common unity. And also, the reason things are trends, like, it's because they are beautiful or they are aesthetically pleasing or they reflect what's culturally relevant to us now. So yeah, it's just I've gone through so many ebbs and flows. I used to dress very masculine and very oversized, and then I dressed very feminine and then androgynous. Like I often, like I said earlier, my styles reflected where I was within myself. And when I would go through periods of like maybe I was feeling more insecure, you could often see that in the way I dressed. I kind of unconsciously would wear things and colors that didn't make me stand out. It made me look small and kind of blend in. And as I've gone through seasons within myself where I feel more confident and sure of who I am, then I start to wear things that are more quote unquote like flattering or um, adventurous or colors that are really lift me versus make me look smaller. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to reflect upon because I've never really tried to analyze that. It's been always such an emotional, intuitive thing throughout my life. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely feel that. I feel like back in college, I definitely had like a blue phase where I just wear blue everything.
Mhm.
Um, and it's almost like how you feel kind of dictates where you want to go with your wardrobe. And a part of growing up and I guess getting into personal style developing is almost getting to a point where you're just so comfortable with what you want to be wearing and you can find these thrifted goods that are out there and just almost mix and match where I'm sure your wardrobe at this point, anything you pull in is going to be like, great, this goes with everything else already because you have such a concise vision of like how you want your aesthetic to be like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big thing as well. Like style, especially if you're buying things secondhand, it takes quite a bit of time to curate a wardrobe that reflects the way you want to look. Um, so it does require some patience and um, adaptability. So yeah, I definitely feel like my wardrobe now reflects something. Like I used to look at my friends' wardrobes and I would be like, oh, I love this thing and that thing. And I wish I loved doing that. Like it's interesting to me and it's exciting. But now I look at my own wardrobe and I'm like, I've got everything and more that I could want. And that's quite nice to like have that kind of those options and not feel like I'm desiring or that's not true, but like yeah, just feeling like quite satisfied with what I have available to me. Yeah. And also it's so easy to like want to buy more things and to want to continue to consume. Um, so I've definitely recently been trying to make the effort to like look to my wardrobe to create what I see myself looking outward for, like
Hmm.
in terms of what items or styles or all of that that I've been like entertaining, spending money on and consuming more of. Like actually, I have more than what I need in my wardrobe already.
Yeah, like there's always the chasing, but then you can look back and be like, do I really need an extra piece, or is it really that dopamine hit that's like that the nice part of copying?
Yeah, it's absolutely that.
So tell us a little bit more about growing up in thrifting, right? My favorite reference for thrifting is definitely just kind of North America, where maybe once in a while you come across something like a Brooks Brothers navy blazer, your classic kind of Americana piece there. What's the New Zealand scene for thrifting like, and how is it maybe different from when you were a kid versus right now?
Mm, the New Zealand scene of thrifting. I stepped out of it for almost like maybe 5 or 6 years because I
Yeah.
was quite nomadic. So I was like, I can't keep consuming things. So I had a big gap between being like from like 18 through to like maybe 23. I wasn't really doing any of it. So stepping back into it, I guess the biggest thing in terms of this is more financial, really. The biggest difference I've noticed is more so just things are a lot more expensive than when I was a kid. Like I was buying stuff at op shops. I think part of it was probably fueled by the fact that it was accessible to me as a young adult. Um, and then, yeah, like because it's become more popular and almost like, I don't know, I live in an echo chamber, but I feel like what I'm seeing around me is more and more people are turning to buy secondhand things, which is so cool to see this cultural shift occurring. But it does mean that yeah, it just requires more time to find, I guess, those quality items that you might be looking for. I do find myself now spending a lot more time in like curated consignment stores where people are donating their really nice things to these stores or someone's done the curation for you. Um, and like I appreciate people doing that work and it saves a lot of time for me. Um, yeah, but in terms of like a day to day thrift, it's really hit and miss and it always has been. But um, I don't know, it's just for the joy of hunting, hey, like if you can let go of attachment to finding that perfect thing, then it's always a good time. um, I think what's changed as well is just like what I'm looking for, and that I guess I really value like really high quality tailored vintage items, and that can be quite hard to find in op shops in New Zealand. Um, like it's kind of hard to find anything. It's like a stretch to find anything older than the 70s. You're probably seeing more things from the 2000s or 90s or 80s, and even then, that's almost getting quite rare now. Like
Mm.
our thrift stores are such a reflection as well of how we're consuming in the modern day, and I am seeing a lot more like fast fashion trying to be moved through there. Um, so yeah, it has changed a lot in that um, regard of what's available, but also what I value. You know, as I've gotten older, more and more valued the really high quality items, which just requires a bit more patience or just investing a bit more money. Um, in terms of like the Aotearoa vintage and thrifting scene, I kind of mentioned it before. It feels like everyone around me is doing it, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah.
That so many people around me value to buy secondhand clothing. And then like I mainly have friends online who are like reselling stuff. And yeah, like I said earlier, I think the beautiful thing about it is each person's little business reflects their own personal style and reflects the things that they value. And you get to see everyone's different flavor represented in their little shops. And I like to think that that's the same for my it's barely a shop. It's more of like a side hustle. It's like something I do more so out of love,
Yeah.
and a means of creative expression. And if I make a sale, I'm really grateful and I can go reinvest that in the thrift stores.
Yeah, I hear that story a lot where, it's that full thrifting journey that you have for yourself, and then you start finding stuff that are of your taste, but you're like,
Mm,
I'm not really gonna rock this. Could be sizing or whatever piece there, and you just start curating for other people who want to tap into that aesthetic. What
yeah.
got you started with I've Got the Goods, where one day, Rhiannon just sitting there being like, hey, you know what I'm gonna do?
I was like, I can't remember if I was 14 or, oh, nah, I think I was 15 or 16 when I first started I've Got the Goods. I think I saw a few people around me doing it, and I was a young woman. I was just at school. I wasn't making any money. Fashion was something that I loved. Thrifting was something that I loved. And I saw people making some money through it. So I was like, why don't I give it a try? I was paying a lot of attention to like Etsy sellers who were based in like America or the UK, and um, I was really influenced by the things that they were selling, which was kind of like 90s, 1970s, 1980s, like prairie girl interpretations of these really fluffy, ruffly blouses and long dresses and high necks, and I loved it. And I was finding stuff like that in the op shops. And I, like you said, like you start to see things that you really appreciate, but you recognize is not quite right for you. And I just started collecting things and pursuing, um, yeah, pursuing reselling online. And I was taking, taking pictures in my backyard, modeling, posting on Instagram. But again, it was kind of something that, on one hand, I was probably early in the game in Aotearoa in terms of being a reseller on Instagram. But on the other hand, the stuff that I was selling didn't reflect the style in Aotearoa in New Zealand. We were way more street style. I'd still say that's quite true. Like it's very street style, really sportswear orientated. So I wasn't really um, able to move the stock because I didn't have the right audience. And if I'd maybe stuck to it, that would be the case. I'd have that audience, but life took me in other directions, and I went traveling and I let it go. And I've Got the Goods sometimes every time I would like move away from somewhere to try sell some of the things I needed to get rid of, which was great because I had friends and family and all of that would buy some bits and pieces from me. But it wasn't until I've returned to Otautahi Christchurch, which is where I grew up as a teenager, that I kind of came full circle to it and felt myself quite divinely led back to studying fashion and actually then also pursuing to share my own creative expression online. Um, and that kind of being through I've Got the Goods. And as a little like, again, like it's more on the side, the selling. It's like, it's a bonus. Um, so I've returned to it from a place that feels, I guess, also a lot more centered. Um, I think I'm more aware of the fact that like that the peace that I'm seeking and like all these external pursuits is actually something that I have within myself.
Yeah.
So relating to things in the world like this creative pursuit with that knowledge is a lot more, I guess, grounding. It means you're not so subject to the fickleness of this realm of validation and whether you're good enough because because I know inherently I am good enough. Um, I don't know if that makes sense. I jumped around a bit.
No,
I guess
that really it really resonates because it's kind of
yeah,
like, are you chasing the numbers where you can go in this endless rabbit hole of I just want more followers, or are you being authentic to what your style is and you're just bringing it out there so that people that will resonate with that will find you, and kind of like ultimately that's where the community comes from.
yeah, absolutely. Just showing up authentically, and that's how you develop true relationships. And it's an interesting thing to do online, but I think love and connection knows no boundaries. So hence why social media and the communities that can form on here can be really beautiful reflection of that. It's just been another means to do that on an international scale.
Exactly that. So we talked a lot about fashion itself, kind of the journey of style and so on. Something that really stood out in your profile was bridging fashion and devotion to God.
Yeah.
What's that about? Like, unpack that for us a little bit.
So when I returned to Utatahi, I was really seeking healing in my life, and um, I met a beautiful person whose name is Thomas, who's actually my fiance now. But he introduced me to a medium of healing that says that you are one in God, that you are one in love, you are one in peace, you are whole in truth, you are free in truth, and this is beyond the world. Like this is speaking to us as spirit, um, and it's a teaching that has changed my life. And it's a teaching that also asks me to surrender to God's will for me. It asks me to do my best as much as possible to let kind of God lead my life. Um, and that looks like kind of letting go of a lot of my prejudices and my ideas of what I think things should look like. I guess some people could parallel it to trying to listen to their intuition, um, trying to listen to that voice within you that asks you to trust and that leads you in love, but doesn't always look the way that you think it should. Um, and since I've been in relationship to devoting myself to God, I have been led back to the world of fashion. And like I said, as a teenager, I was studying and I was trying to sell things online. And then I turned away and I went abroad and I did different things. And I actually turned away really hard. I didn't want anything to do with fashion anymore. I was quite exhausted by the materialism of it. I worked in in a consignment store, and I was surrounded by hoarders, and I was becoming a hoarder myself. Like it was just, I got to see some of the ugly parts within myself that I didn't want to entertain anymore, and it really turned me off. But fast forward like 5 or 6 years, I've returned to Utasahi, and I found myself in deep relationship to devotion to God, and um, within that, I was learning to surrender to God's voice to lead my life, and that had meant that he told me to return to school. He told me to return to studies, and I've been working in organic vegetable farming. Just for context, in that gap, that's what I've been pursuing and doing is organic market gardening. Um, but things started changing, and some space opened up, and yeah, Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, it's time to return to study. It's time to return to your fashion, which is such an interesting thing, is trying to hold this like truth that in truth, my peace is something that's within myself and something that's inherent in my connection to God. And to do the very worldly thing of like, I'm going to go be in the world of fashion and I'm going to make clothes and I'm going to buy a lot of clothes and I might try to sell them and I'm going to have a fucking fashion profile on Instagram and I'm going to be like, look how, I'm going to model this. And it's so image orientated and it's so worldly. And it's a really interesting thing for me personally to be like bridging is like trying to continue to return back to what I understand as my center now, which is God. So trying to do these creative, worldly things, but know that my happiness, my fulfillment isn't hinged on those external pursuits. It's this like returning always back to what I'm actually seeking is inside of myself, and everything I do in the world is a bonus almost. And it's not. It's like learning to not, yeah, hinge our fulfillment and peace on the fickleness of everything that's occurring outside of us. Because, it can be so harrowing when you're doing things and investing so much time and devotion into a creative or career or relation orientated, and for it to fall apart. And when you're so identified in your worth being in the success of that thing, all of a sudden your peace is disrupted. your certainty is disrupted. Your center doesn't exist anymore because it's just fallen away from your hands. And what I know to be true is that, in truth, my center and the peace and the fulfillment I'm actually seeking is something within me. But that is hard to remember when you're doing things in the world. When you're doing, especially when you're doing something you're really passionate about, I think, because it can be very consuming, which is quite exciting. But it's, yeah. So I guess for me, it's not just about bridging fashion with the devotion of God. It's about bridging my life with the devotion of God. Yeah.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
kind of makes sense.
That was amazing. It really sounds like it's kind of like style isn't just what you're wearing. Style is the core fiber of who you are. And it's
Mm,
not the clothes wearing you and dictating, oh, like Supreme's in, and it's 2016 all over again. It's kind of like, hey, who are you outside of fashion, outside of your work? Just
mm,
fundamentally, what is that grounding center there? For some folks, it's God. For other folks, it can be other things. But once
yeah.
you have that, how do you then kind of channel that in expressing yourself into, the very worldly arts that we do have, which, for some literal art, putting painting on a paper, and for others, kind of like yourself, like channel that into the fashion. And it's awesome to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting line to be walking, I find. Yeah.
Yeah,
Trying to hold both of those things.
definitely hear that. Right on. So I know we're a little bit over time here, but this was an amazing chat. I'm gonna start getting to editing and seeing what we can do here with like little clips.
Cool.
Um, but Rhiannon, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and let's see what we can make from this.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for taking the time and listening. And yeah, I look forward to what comes of it.
Hey, right on. All right, have a good one. Cheers.
Kia ora, see ya.